Now, this is where we start spoiling The Last of Us. So if you haven't watched it, if you haven't played the game, Mike, I'll try not to spoil the game for you because I know you want to play it and you haven't
True,
yet.
yes.
But,
I mean, I know the general story arc because of the show,
yeah.
but I do know that there are differences intentionally because I did watch the post-show stuff every time. And the actual creator of the game was part of the show. And so whenever anybody online was like, well, there's a word of this, he can go, suck my nuts. I'm doing it because I can. And it carried weight.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, you know, the guys that fucked up the end of Game of Thrones, you're like, you fucked it up. We hate you for it. And they're like, you can't tell him he fucked it up because I'm the creator. I own this all. This is my vision.
Yeah, Neil Druckmann, who wrote episodes of the show, where he even said in those post-show segments that he was given the opportunity to go back and change some things around. In hindsight, things he would have done differently, he was given that chance to do that.
Well, yeah, like the limitations of the game or the mechanics of the game. You're like, this would be so much better as if I had more time to expand on this, which as a show you can. As a game, too much exposition kind of kills it. You know, pressing X for dialogue for an hour doesn't really work.
Honestly, Mike, I think you got the better end of the deal by going into the show first.
Oh, okay.
And I'll cite Long Time as an example. That episode, by the way, I can't even think about it without feeling incredibly depressed. Like, my God, that just, like, I've watched shows where incredibly depressing things happen. I've watched Up and was emotional watching the beginning of Up.
I mean, let's be honest, everybody's emotional with
Up. Anthony Edwards' last episode of ER always gets me, but nothing like I can watch all that and like I don't have to stop. I don't have to pause. The Last of Us, I actually had to stop because it was like Becky looked over at me. She could tell I was not well.
Oh yeah,
like
that. Sarah and I powered through it, but we definitely, it was hardcore. We were.
I knew you were unwell. I didn't have to ask. You were genuinely unwell.
I mean, when you make Nick Offerman cry, then you know you done fucked up.
So I do have to say though, the end of that episode where they talk to the actual creators, I can't remember which guy it was, but he's like, I've watched this, like he said, I think like I said 100 times. And when you're creating a show, that's legit. That's a number. He goes, I cry every time.
Yeah, that was Craig Mazin.
Yeah, and I'm like that I would believe after watching that episode. That I believe.
And that's one of those instances where Neil Druckmann said he wished he was given an opportunity to expand upon something that it shows up in the game, but it doesn't play out the same way. And he was given the opportunity to really build upon it. Now, there's other things in the show that, Mike, you'll see when you're going through the game where they can, like the whole Kansas City sequence, for example.
Yep.
It's in the game, but it's much longer.
Different. And it's more video. You can tell where like, oh, this is an homage to the video game. But I can understand that when you're in it, you're slogging through. You're not just having a little bit, a cut scene, you know, some dialogue and more of this. It was long. Yeah, you could tell because you know it's coming from a video game. You can kind of see a little bit of its source material.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
the last episode, and not to spoil anything about the last mission of the game, but I'm watching the last episode, and there's the sequence of Joel going through the hospital and just mowing everybody down, just like the Terminator in the police station. Just like
Sarah was watching that, she goes, "This has to have been the finale, like the final boss level kind of thing." I'm like, it does play like that.
So I'm watching it. I'm thinking to myself, that whole sequence felt not very rushed, but it felt rushed. It didn't have the same, for me, it didn't like hit the same. It felt more anticlimactic than it did climactic.
Is it because when you're playing it and you're playing through it that you're more conscious of how you've got to be able to get through, not take damage, not die, kill all these people? It seems more the pressure is on you. because you're
That-
playing it?
That's one of those things I had to think about after the fact when I was really reflecting on the last episode and everything that went down, because I was playing the game in tandem. I was playing the PS5 version in tandem. So pretty much after watching an episode, I would then go and play through in the game everything that went down in the episode. So pretty much the night that the finale aired, I then went and played the end of the game. And it took me probably about 2 hours to get through that mission because there's a lot of strategy involved. In the show, Joel's just like walking down a hall and just picking dudes off. In the game,
He basically goes superhero mode, if you will.
yeah. In the
Yeah.
in the game, you got to be hiding behind stuff. You got to really be strategic because Naughty Dog didn't fuck around with developing their AI system for the enemies.
It will fuck you up.
And it was more challenging than I remember because the PS5 remake uses the engine from the second game, which
So the AI is tweaked a little harder.
yeah. So they imported that, whereas in the first, the original release, the PlayStation 3 release, the enemies, they'd act like enemies, but they were dumb. In the PS5 remake, they're actually actively hunting you, and they remember
Oh, I heard the sound coming from over here, and he's got two accesses of avenue. I'm gonna go this way, and the other guy's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go the other way. We're gonna flank him."
yeah. Or they
Like,
call
oh fuck.
the enemies actually call to each other. They call to one another, and they will they're not
Coordinate.
they're not just robots. There's a whole system there.
You
And
don't
that's
just
what
put a box over your head and walk by them and they don't notice.
exactly. Yeah, there's like a degree of thinking and timing involved, and obviously none of that is in the show. Obviously they have time constraints that they're working with as well. How do we fit this into 60 to 80 minutes? But then someone on Reddit put it perfectly, and I'm paraphrasing here. It also felt rushed because Joel didn't get killed and have to restart 20 times.
Save point. Save point. Save
Yeah.
point. Save point. Why are you saving every 30 seconds? Shut the fuck up.
So there's that.
It's like playing Dead Souls. All right.
There's an Easter egg that I didn't catch. The scene
There's a lot of Easter eggs, but go. Which one didn't you catch?
when he gets into the operating room.
Okay.
One of the surgeons, or the nurse, I think technically she's
Female,
a nurse.
female nurse assistant. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Surgical
one that
assistant.
the one that has a speaking line
Mhm.
is played by, now she was obscured in a surgical mask and a surgical cap, but her name is Laura Bailey, and she plays a major character in the game The Last of Us Part 2.
Oh, okay.
And
I do love how like they've been pulling a lot of the voice actors. Like, hey, I know you're a voice actor, but we're going to give you an actor role, and it's not going to be the same role that you voiced in. But we're going to give you that. Like it's like a knighthood, like an honorary. Like you're good. You're in good people.
some of them have had like more on-screen roles and don't always do video games. Like that's like Ashley Johnson, for example, right? Like she was
Oh,
on
yeah.
Growing Pains. She was a child star. She's in the Avengers, but so doesn't do a ton of video games and then does The Last of Us. But Troy Baker, I can't name anything that wasn't a video game that he's in. And for him to have an on-air role or an on-screen role rather, he was great.
Oh yeah.
Like Buddy. That's not his name, but that's just like what he's known as, is Buddy.
Hey, buddy. Hope you find your dad.
Same deal with what's her face, Melanie Linsky's character. Her henchman is the guy that plays Joel's brother.
Yep.
In the game. So I like that. I like that Druckmann did that he was able to pull all those folks in. It would have been nice if he got Nolan North, who plays David. If Nolan North got a cameo, but don't know why he wasn't on the show. But Mike, what was your favorite episode of the series?
Favorite episode. I mean, there's two ways of doing it. Favorite episode of watching it a single time is episode 3.
Okay.
Okay.
Understand.
Favorite episode to be able to rewatch. is is it when they make it to Kansas City? No, you know what? I like it when they make it to Wyoming. I do like it when they make it to the West.
Okay.
That it's like you know that there's stuff. It feels good, and you've got that little banter of the Northern Exposure folks. Is that what it was? Or Twin Peaks? What was the
Northern Exposure?
Northern Exposure. Yeah, the Northern Exposure. Yeah. And because I never watched that show, but I was like, I know there's a reference here somewhere. Yeah, like that. It brings together. You know that if you've never heard of the game, you know that there's this resolution. I've gotten to my point, but you know there's a lot more left, and I like that point right there.
What I like that you brought that up, because what I liked about that episode, and pretty much, I don't know if it's even right to call it a sequence because it was the majority of that episode. All of that was lifted out of the second game. Mike,
so I've been told there was a speech that she told was almost verbatim, I believe.
now that one's in the first game.
First game, yeah.
You'll get to that part. But when they go into Wyoming and they're in that town, all of that is from the second game. So I was surprised to see that they actually took something out of the sequel and interjected it in the first, what's based on the first game. And there's a character shows up in one scene, and I will try not to spoil this because it's more for the second game, but it is a character that is very prominent in the second game that is connected to Ellie, and it's all but confirmed that that's who this character is, and it was Ellie's first time seeing this character.
I think I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I know what you're talking about.
She didn't have a speaking role. They show her.
Yep.
3 seconds.
Yep. And I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I know what you're talking about.
So I'm hoping.
But yes,
I'm hoping we build upon that as we get season 2.
As we wait for 2025 and season 2.
Yeah. So when you get to that part in the game, you'll see it's the script and the flow is there, but the scenery, the setting is entirely different.
Is it not 10 miles west of Boston?
What in the nice Rocky Mountains of the Pioneer Valley?
Absolutely. Nothing like Lexington and Concord at 10,000 feet elevation.
Jesus Christ. Like that, it would have been almost perfect. Like they even put a Cumberland Farms in the show. They did that. They didn't screw around with the local references until you go 10 miles west of Boston.
Boston, yeah.
Is that where you are? No, you're not.
No. Hey, it got us talking, right?
Maybe they did that intentionally. Knowing Druckmann, they did that intentionally.
It's like just gonna, because you know what? If nothing else, anybody that films in Boston or films quote unquote in and around Boston knows that if they don't do something accurately, they're gonna fucking hear it.
Yep. I mean, even in the game when you're in that sequence, there's police cars everywhere that say Amherst County. And as a Massachusetts resident, where the fuck is that?
He didn't have a Boston accent, and I would have thought by the amount of time he had spent there, he would have had one by then. Yeah.
You would have adopted one over 20 years.
Yeah,
okay.
So that was a little unrealistic.
Maybe there's just a lot of people.
There are two kinds of people, though. There's people that will automatically quickly take up an accent, and people that don't. So he could be one of those. He didn't come from the South. He came from Texas, right?
He did come from Texas. That's correct. And it seemed like Boston was one of the few, if not the only, quarantine zone that was like functioning normally, however you want to define normal, compared to like Kansas City, for example, which was overrun by its population and had no law. So people could just be flocking in from all over the country, and the accent could just get weeded out, because you don't hear that in the game either. It's not like Fallout 4 where all the NPCs have quote unquote Boston accents.
93 looked the same.
It did.
Oh, parking lot? Yeah.
When I was showing my father Fallout 4, he because my father's older, right? He loved the fact that because it was an alternate future where things didn't really progress past the 1950s, even though it was the 23rd century or whatever. that the central artery still exists in Boston, even though it's like all bombed out and decrepit. And he just liked it. He's like, what year does this nuclear war happen? I go 2077. He's like, I like that the central artery's still there. That's good. He's like, the big thing never happened. Like, you're right. You know, the game and the remake and the PS5 remake of The Last of Us, they actually took out from the original release all of the T logos. They like don't even refer to it as the MBTA. In the original release, there's T logos like everywhere. And I don't know if it was a licensing issue or if the fact that in the game the orange line was as fucked as it is in real life.
Can't sue me for libel because it's accurate.
Zombies.
Becky, what was your favorite episode of the show? As someone who's
Wow.
not familiar with the source material.
As you asked Mike, I'm like, I need to think about that. I liked the first and the second. I'm going to say the first. I was surprised it sucked me in. I am a sucker for a local reference and a Cumberland Farms. I know that wasn't the first episode, though.
But still.
Yeah. For me, honestly, I really loved the whole thing. I was surprised I did, but I was really sucked in the first 2-3 episodes.
I'm really happy.
It did get a little longer for me at the end. But...
Sure. I'm really happy that you got into it, considering like you're not a gamer and it's something that's based off a game and it's going to have that.
Yeah, and I'm not a
established
TV person.
And a zombie person. You're not really.
If it's not a documentary, I typically don't want anything to do with it.
Oh, did Ken Burns make this? Because I'm not watching it.
The Last of Us. I'm Richard Attenborough. I'm sorry. Is it David Attenborough?
There's a difference.
Okay.
David.
Welcome to Jurassic Park. Sorry, wrong Attenborough. But anyway, okay, yeah. So
at no expense.
So I had told you many times leading up to the show premiering that in the beginning of the game, the opening sequence of the game leaves me an emotional wreck.
Yeah, I mean, every episode you said, just warning, I'm going to be extremely emotional.
Yeah,
and I'm like, yep, okay.
And when Sarah dies, you were looking over at me, waiting for me, like just to make sure, like, are you crying? Are you crying? Yeah, you're crying. Yeah, you're sad. And they did it like the guy that plays his brother, Gabriel Luna. That's the actor's name. He plays Tommy. So Gabriel Luna is the only person of the main cast who had played The Last of Us, who had played it multiple times. Everyone else was shown either cutscenes or given the game to try it out. But Gabriel Luna was the only one who had actually played it. And like, if you watch like side by sides of Luna and then Tommy in the game, he's like, this is his moment. It's like 1-to-1. Just the inflection, his delivery, like you could tell he was, he was getting to pretty much cosplay. He was acting out, like, he's playing with his little action figures, reciting lines.
Hey, you know what? If you've got to, you've got to. He's like, I got to deliver the same emotional experience that I felt. Go for it, right?
Yep. And finally, now in the game, what you see in the show is very comparable to the game, and when when Outbreak Day happens, when everything goes to shit. But I do like that the show, at least in the first few episodes, did show glimpses of things that were going on as the outbreak was happening, because you don't see that in a lot of these zombie post-apocalyptic shows. It's usually the aftermath.
Yeah, that's one thing that because Sarah was like, oh, the fucking zombie thing. Okay, whatever. But as soon as she watched, she's like, the fact that they explain where it comes from, and they don't do this pussyfooting bullshit like, oh, it's surprise, what happened? I don't know, but somehow society fell apart. And then two, like you can see, okay, this is exactly what's happening, and you can understand from point A to point B with that gap of time, you know exactly what's happened. There is no question of, I need to watch year after year after year to know what's going on.
Yep. That's what pissed me off about Fear the Walking Dead, was that the show was sold as being showing like what was going to happen when the outbreak of that virus occurs. And you only see it in the first like 4 episodes. And
then it turns into regular Walking Dead. Yeah.
Yeah. It was so infuriating. And then they show scenes in The Walking Dead of the outbreak happening, but like for seconds. And that was just as infuriating. I want to see it happen. I want to see the collapse, like the slow or fast collapse of society, however you put it. Not like the beginnings of it, and then the aftermath, where there's a whole chunk in the middle that's taken out.
I do love that speech from the scientists in Indonesia. Just
Mm.
what do we do? You bomb everything.
Yeah.
and the guy just looks and goes, holy shit. Like, I mean, bomb it now. Like, literally, in this city, I'm sitting in this city. You need to bomb it.
Yep.
Oh fuck.
Firebomb it. Burn everything. There's a film called, I believe it's called Maggie. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger and Abigail Breslin. It was when Schwarzenegger got back into acting.
Ah, yes, I recall vaguely.
Because he had a string of, like, he gets back into acting, and pretty much all the movies he was doing weren't good. And Maggie was one of the few ones that he did that was actually very good. And it's about a zombie outbreak, a zombie apocalypse, but the outbreak, it's in the middle of it happening, but there is some degree of control over the situation. And it's basically like people are sort of, it's kind of like, the middle of the COVID outbreak, the pandemic, if you will. It's society, things are still going, but now you just kind of have to just be aware that, hey, if you walk into this building, there might be an undead trying to kill you.
Which I think honestly is somewhat more accurate as opposed to a complete. I mean, obviously, if it's a fungal outbreak like The Last of Us, you're fucked. But is a general falling down of society. It's slower paced. It's more a slow fall as opposed to.
Yeah, I don't think anywhere in the game. Maybe it was mentioned, maybe in passing somewhere in the game, but I love that the show, like in the first episode, it's hinting at the fact that, because like they're talking about things that are typically like food products that are typically made using flour, and that the main characters are avoiding it, whereas the neighbors are like, hey, we made too much of this baked good, please have some.
Oh my god, yes. Yeah.
So everyone's hypothesizing after watching the first episode that has something to do with flour, and then that second or third episode were just straight up, yeah, the flour's contaminated. Y'all ate it. Y'all are gonna die. We're fucked. I like that they at least explained where it came from.
Exactly.
That's what I like about 28 Days Later, is that with the monkeys, and the poor scientist is just trying to explain, like, infected
with rage.
Infected with what? Rage. And then just like, okay, I don't believe you. And then next thing you know, 28 days later, the world's come to a grinding halt.
So the game didn't give any indication of what happened.
It might have been mentioned in passing. I feel like it's something, there is one reference to it, but it was missed. Because here's the thing about Naughty Dog, and which is games in general, because the technology is so powerful now, you can really get detailed with little things. You can put like signs on walls and design, like with like just writing and graphics and everything, and no one's ever going to stop to look at them. But you can, and you can read them. And there's probably something on there that mentions, don't eat this product.
Yeah.
At risk of illness. And
posters on the wall in the bedroom.
Yeah, Druckmann probably just like put it in the game, and we just never saw it.
Do you have any critiques of the show? What did you not like?
I don't. I wish they had followed the game with the whole Kansas City sequence. Like, I get it; it was to move things along, but in the game, that whole sequence takes place in Pittsburgh, and I kind of wish it was in Pittsburgh and not Kansas City. I don't think it really
early because it was earlier along in their journey.
Yeah. I think for the show, they wanted to establish that they were making headway across the country. Whereas, I mean, I guess in the game, it kind of does the same thing. Where, okay, well, everything happens in Pittsburgh, and then all of a sudden now you're in the Rockies. So what happened between Pittsburgh and there? Whereas in the show, they changed the setting for some reason to Kansas City.
Because Kansas City looks slightly more like Alberta.
A little bit. Not in the least. What are you talking about? Uh, I was very unsure about Melanie Linsky's character. Is it Kathleen? Is that her name?
I believe so.
Because she's not in the game.
No, and they, oh my god, the fucking internet was just like
until they explained what, like, her purpose on the show and what connection she had. And then that also gives Henry and Sam some backstory that's not in the game. So there were things that the way they set this stuff up, like, was very head scratching, but they at least seemed to then kind of, tie up the loose ends in the following episode.
and the thing is it only noticed because you played the game? If you had not played the game, would you have noticed?
Exactly. Like well, also don't watch like the interviews at the end, because at the interviews at the end, they'll just straight up tell you like, hey, we didn't do this in the game, so we're doing it here.
Yeah.
Pulling the curtain back there,
which I do appreciate, because you're like, all right, I saw this, and it makes, sometimes you put it in the back of your head like, oh, what do I did that? And then they literally like, oh, hey, the thing that I think that you're going to be questioning, oh, we did this because of this. Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, I think back, it would just be, as someone who played the game, I'd say that showing more of the Lincoln, Massachusetts sequence would have been nicer, but instead we got long time, which is like, okay, I will take that. Absolutely. The Lincoln sequence in the game is great, but if we get long time on the show, give me
in a heartbeat. Yeah.
And then I mentioned it earlier, but just the last episode, just the whole hospital sequence, just feeling rushed. But again, that's just because
I was gonna say, I felt there should be 1 or 2 more episodes.
Agreed. Yeah.
It's always like that. They'd be like, oh, we're gonna give you 8 episodes. Like, can you give us 10? Can you give us 10?
Just give us 12. I think if you give us 12, then you could stretch it out just a little bit more.
Yeah, I've not played the game yet because I've read things.
The PC
version.
Yeah, the PC port of the game that just came out a couple weeks ago, and in a rare misstep for Naughty Dog, the PC version is performance-wise not good.
No, and it's like, hey, I hear like people are saying I've even got more than the minimum requirements, and it's still not working right for me.
That's
I'm like, well, in that case, I ain't touching it till you guys fix it. Fuck that noise.
Yeah, and Naughty Dog is sort of synonymous with perfection at this point. They're up there with,
it's the anti-Bethesda.
Yeah, they're like Rockstar Games, where it's quality and quantity, and accept nothing less, nothing short of perfect. And here's the problem. I can tell you the problem.
So, I'm gonna tell you.
Naughty Dog did not 100% handle the PC version.
That is why it's not 100% then.
They outsourced it to a studio called Iron Galaxy Games. I'm sorry, Iron Galaxy Studios. I guess it doesn't matter because they suck. According to Wikipedia, Iron Galaxy is also known for porting Batman Arkham Knight to the PC. Ports infamous for their poor optimization and bugs.
So why would you go with that company then?
Because it's cheap.
Oh.
It probably would have done it for half the well, do it for cheap, half the cost of probably another studio that's does the same work and probably better. But also, I don't know like how experienced Naughty Dog is with doing PC versions of games if they've only developed on console.
Okay.
Batman Arkham Knight, the PC version, was absolutely it was absolutely terrible. It needed like there had to be Jesus Christ. I saw that happening, and I saw it happening. I saw the tangle. I saw the cable getting tangled.
Fucking kids over there.
And I heard the thud. The Arkham Knight PC port is considered like one of the worst. And it because I was working at WB when that came out. And it was a rare instance. It was like, now Steam handles refunds, like Steam does refunds. Back then, they broke their policy and like, okay, we will offer refunds for this game because it's so bad. It's so unplayable. And I don't think they ever got it into a playable state.
And I feel like Naughty Dog's going to make sure it does happen. But in the meantime, I'm just waiting.
Yeah, I would wait. I would definitely wait. There was an update that came out over the weekend that did fix a lot of issues, but people are still saying there's a lot of things that still need work. I was watching a video of someone who, as they were running, the sky, like the clouds and the position of the sun was moving with them, and if they took a step back, then the clouds and the sun would like go backwards. That makes sense.
It makes sense, but it doesn't not make sense. But yes.
Right. Yeah. That's what was happening was not supposed to happen. That's something that needs to be fixed, and it doesn't happen in the.
We're just outside Barstow, man.
Yeah, that does not happen in the versions of the game that have been out. So, last question: do you think Joel, watching the series, watching the last episode, do you think Joel did the right thing? This has been a point of.
I feel like I feel like looking at it the longer lens. Yes, overall, yes. Certain things, no, but overall, yes.
Okay.
You want me to get into details or no?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And also, this has been one of the most like controversial things since 2013. What Joel did and what he told Ellie.
Okay.
It is still a debate to this day.
Okay. So here's the deal. All right. We don't know how many scientists are left and how many doctors are left. So killing the doctor, hard no. You done fucked up. I understand he's trying to protect, Ellie from getting chopped up. But look, you got there are certain quote unquote non-combatants you got to leave alive in here. Okay. There's no Harvard medical school anymore. Okay. That being said, they were planning on just cutting her open once and getting what they needed. If they didn't get what they needed, it was a waste. It was a complete waste. Why can't you get blood cultures? You can do like spinal tap shit, like stuff that is invasive but not deadly to her, and use her as a living petri vessel for the rest of her life. Now, granted, that's not a great thing for her to be, but there's more opportunity for her to be alive and offer more options for a treatment than just cutting her brain open.
Yeah,
so my answer was more scientifically based as opposed to emotional, like, oh my God, because he loves her so much and it's Sarah and he's missing her. No. It's more like, dude, options, man. You got to get scientific options. If one experiment sucks, you don't have an option for two if you kill the control. Like, come on.
Okay. What you said about the surgeon, I'm going to say consequences. Actions have consequences, and that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Now, I think Joel is just a selfish bastard.
Okay.
He's just trying to, obviously, he's upset and angry that his daughter was taken away from him and develops this bond with Ellie, which in the show, it is a much, we get a more humanized version of Joel. We don't see that as much in the game. We don't have that, like that scene where he's having a panic attack because he's freaking out over the weight of responsibility of having to watch Ellie. That was it. I liked that they showed that human side, but I think he was very selfish in that she is. Obviously, it's not a guarantee, Mike, as you said, but there is a good chance she holds a cure. It's sacrifice one to save
the many. Yeah. It's the train the train trolley conundrum of, if you don't move, if you don't move the lever, you're running over 5 people. But if you actively move the lever and it runs over that one person, you chose to run over that one person. But if you don't move the lever and you never touched it, are you at fault for the other deaths?
Yeah.
It's kind of that, are you culpable by not doing anything? Are you culpable by doing something?
So that was that line from Star Trek, is that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few?
Yes, Spock. Yes.
Yeah, he had now yeah, you have the chance to develop a cure, but then like what happens afterwards? Like do you rebuild society? Do you just begin anew? Like yeah, okay, you stop the cordyceps fungus and you stop everything that's going on, but then like what is that? Obviously it's not going to have any, you're not going to like rebuild and bounce back immediately, but I don't know, it's such a that one is such a gray area, but ultimately boils down to Joel like having this decision, like, can I potentially save the world, or do I want to have a daughter figure and be selfish and make myself happy? And I don't think he was thinking in that moment. He was really only thinking of himself.
Oh yeah, and in that moment, as the character, he was completely selfish, and he was doing things for himself. As the outside observer, those are my thoughts.
Yep.
But in a moment, oh yeah, it was a completely selfish move, and he wasn't thinking about the greater good. He was just thinking about himself.
Well, not even that. Not even thinking about what Ellie might think, because Ellie's
Oh yeah,
not an
because he
idiot.
fucking lies to her.
Yeah, well, she's not an idiot. She's gonna figure it out. She's gonna realize what it is he did, and she somehow will figure out that Joel lied to her, whether or not he admits it, or she hears it from someone else, or it just becomes obvious, or maybe she could just tell the whole time he was lying.
That's a vibe I got.
Yeah.
I got we were set up that she knows.
She it's one of those, you know the lie is there, but the lie is too big to admit to yourself.
Yes.
And that's why she's like, I need you to look at me in the eyes and tell me you did this because, because we're going to be okay. And that's what it is. We're going to be okay. And she goes, okay, I can stomach the lie, and I can gloss over the lie, and I can live the lie until something else comes along that forces open that container that I put the lie in and says, oh no, this is a fucking lie. Deal with it. And for right now, she doesn't have to deal with it. The lie's there, but it's locked away.
It even says that on the label. A fucking lie. A little Acme logo at the top.
Season 2 just opens and she just shoots him.
He's like Ryder Strong at the beginning of Cabin Fever 2. Yeah, so you see this in both the show, you see them both in the game. And this is why I think that she knows. Like, she's much smarter than she leads herself on to be. If he hesitated, that's what it is. She asked him a question, he hesitated before he responded. If he was, I just feel like this could be, I could be talking on my ass, but I feel like it's like a psychological thing. If you're not lying, then you respond like, were you telling the truth? You immediately, yes, I was telling the truth.
Yes,
But
if you're
no,
not, if you're not a sociopathic narcissist, yes, generally speaking, you go like that.
because I have lived that, where I have asked, is this a thing? Is this happening? And if the response was anything other than no, or if it wasn't a quick response, then I know you're full of shit. Then I know you're lying to me.
Noted.
So yeah, okay, whatever. But you sure do, Beck. But that's just how I see it with Joel. And that's what I'm going to say, because I do not want to. I'm trying very hard not to spoil. Well, hopefully, season 2 will be about and spoil The Last of Us Part 2, the game, which I have only played once, because that game exhausted me emotionally. I felt just like I had to take a week off from life when I was done with it.
Jack, you need therapy.
That game is the reason why I need therapy. Holy shit. But it was a masterpiece. It was, and somehow I avoided all the spoilers too, because it leaked. The whole thing leaked online like a month before it came out, and the spoilers were everywhere. And somehow I avoided all of them. And I was so proud of myself. That is Mike, you said that, I think you said it before we started recording, that you watched the last episode like the night it aired just so you could avoid the spoilers.
Oh yeah.
Same.
Well, it's so tough to do now, and somehow I was able to skirt around not having The Last of Us Part 2 spoiled for me when the whole thing was out there in the wild for a month. Oh, and quickly, I do want to mention a couple things. So first, I think it's Uncharted 3, which is also a Naughty Dog game. There is a little. This is what I love about games that have that when they establish shared continuity, shared universes, where there's a newspaper in Uncharted 3 that was Naughty Dog teasing The Last of Us because that was the next game to come out. And it's the front page of a newspaper that says, scientists are still trying to understand deadly fungus. So that time, it was starting to happen, but we hadn't gotten there yet. Although, it's also, then there's another Uncharted game that came out after The Last of Us, and the world is very clearly untouched by the virus.
Well, so they figured out the deadly virus at that
They
point.
must have, yeah. Alternate universe.
Multiverse.
Fungal outbreak at Michigan paper mill suspected to have infected nearly 100 workers. It's happening. It's happening.
It's coming.
And then they put a reference in episode 5, Endure and Survive, when they are underground, when Joel, Ellie, and Sam are underground.
In the children's area?
Yep. And there's a drawing on the wall of 2 people, like obviously done by a child. And one of them is dressed up in security gear, and one of the names on the picture says Ish. And in the game, that is a whole story that you can piece together through collectibles. When you're going through that whole sequence, you can find letters that Ish was leaving and little notes, and it effectively sets up and establishes the story of that underground community.
Nice.
And I was so happy they put a reference to that, because they don't talk about it at all. I think they might just kind of like very briefly explain what it is, but I'm happy they at least made just a small, very brief reference to Ish in there, because I love going through. I love picking up all those notes and just like you very slowly but in piecemeal put together a story that explains, okay, this is why I'm in this area, and that's why it looks the way it does. And it also just kind of gives you a some more insights. It's just how bleak and fucked up everything was. So for that, Mike, I'm excited that you're going to experience all of this. So
eventually, when they fix the fucking game.
Eventually. Alternatively,
I mean, I have waited 10 years. I can wait a couple more months.
Alternatively, PlayStation 3s are pretty cheap these days. I mean, you can
that is true.
Get one and get the original release.
Yeah, honestly, I might at this point.
It holds up. It's still very, very.
I'm pretty sure my brother-in-law does have a PlayStation 3, as well as every other console since the Atari in his game room.
Or a PlayStation 4. They put it on the PlayStation 4 as well.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, that's probably actually much easier to find.